While there will be the concern that any move could trigger World War III, something that NATO is pretty unified against. The other stories making headlines, there are several new high-profile COVID cases in Washington, D.C., including one in the White House. Morning Joe is coming right back. From our NBC affiliate in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills police say a group of robbers rolled up in a stolen vehicle and then used sledgehammers to smash the windows of a jewelry store. The suspects allegedly stole handfuls of jewelry before running off. They got away with an estimated $5 million worth of merchandise. Wow. Incredible. And there is a growing number of high-profile COVID cases being reported in Washington. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has tested positive and will no longer be accompanying the president on his trip to Brussels today. Psaki disclosed her infection in a series of tweets yesterday and said she is experiencing only mild symptoms thanks to the vaccine. Just hours later, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also announced on Twitter that she has tested positive for COVID. She said she is experiencing some mild cold symptoms, but is feeling fine.
Peter, a couple of things. Let's talk really quickly just about COVID. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, we're all putting down our guard. A lot of people still getting it. Let me ask this question to both of you. Let's say there's a chemical weapons attack in Mariupol, or a tactical nuclear weapon used somewhere near Kyiv. Does NATO need to go in at that point? Senator, I'll start with you, Blumenthal.
I think depending on its location, the use of either chemical or biological weapons or a tactical nuclear weapon potentially endangers all of the countries, the NATO countries bordering Ukraine, simply by virtue of the potential for contagion or radioactivity. There is a very strong case to be made that it is potentially an attack on NATO, and NATO does need to be involved. We ought to be very, very careful and cautious, and I give the president great credit.
Do you agree we need to tell him now?
Yeah.
These are the red lines, and unlike 2014, you cross the red lines now, they're going to be massive consequences for you.
Yeah, well said. I do believe it's a red line. It shouldn't be crossed. Joe mentioned 2014. Think of what happened in Aleppo.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've got to make it clear that this crosses a line. Whether there's contagion immediately in Eastern European countries like Poland or the Baltics or not. So I do think it's a place where we should make it clear now.
Vladimir Putin's irrational now that he somehow made this great transformation. I don't think so. He walked over us in 2008 after going into Georgia. He walked over us in 2014 after going into Crimea. We cut and run out of Syria, turned Syria over to him after he went in 2015, and then we left in 2018. Time and time again, the United States and the West has not stood up to Vladimir Putin. So he's learned that war crimes pay. And this is the first time the United States has actually acted, and the West has acted in a unified way.
Yeah, we've been saying for a month now that Vladimir Putin made a gross miscalculation with this invasion. But as you say, in his mind, it was a rational calculation based on his experience over 2 decades dealing with the West, as he's dipped his toe in the water of seizing the land of sovereign countries and taking it without much resistance.
Vladimir Putin's chief spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, conceding that Russia has yet to achieve any of its military goals in Ukraine. Peskov refused to deny that Moscow could resort to the use of nuclear weapons. Let's listen to this.
President Putin said that if anybody tries to stop him, very bad things will happen. And I want to know whether you are convinced or confident that your boss will not use that option.
Well, we have a concept of domestic security. And, well, it's public. You can read all the reasons for nuclear arms to be used. So if it is an existential threat for our country, then it can be used in accordance with our concept.
Well,
there are no other reasons that were mentioned in that text.
So you are basically saying only an existential threat to your country. I still don't know whether I've got a full answer from you, and I just I'm just going to assume that President Putin wants to scare the world and keep the world on tenterhooks.
I'm going to say that to their face. I'm going to say all I have to say, I'm going to say when I get there. But I'll be happy to talk to you guys when I get back. How many are you coming?
They're there. Do you have any message?
I know.
Do you have any message for Vladimir Putin?
President, how concerned are you about the threat of chemical warfare right now? That Russia would use chemical weapons. How high is that threat?
I think it's a real threat. Thank you.
He can destroy Kyiv if he wants to, like he did Aleppo or like he did Grozny in Chechnya. But that's a very different order than the Russians are suddenly going to capture and try to hold Ukraine. It's what the hell is the world going to look like after we finally come to a freeze in this conflict? I mean, Biden is saying we need a new world order that the United States is going to lead. The Chinese clearly aren't up for that. If Putin is still in power, and I suspect he will be, he's going to be incredibly angry, still with a big military, and seeing the Ukrainians and NATO and a whole bunch of non-NATO states in between, like Finland and Sweden, for example, as enemies.
And Ashley, well, you, of course, know that President Biden was vice president when Russia took Crimea, and the Obama White House has been criticized for not doing more.
And we actually went back and looked at that period, and it's a fascinating window into what he's going to do now and his thinking now, because back then he was vice president, he was the number two, but he and a number of people who are still with him, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, were much more hawkish, and Biden himself pushed. He was the point person, the Obama point person on Ukraine, and he pushed to send javelins and lethal assistance to Ukraine. Obama decided against it. It was too escalatory. Biden was loyal and kept his opinions to himself.